Two of the official Operation Midway Blitz. Let's bring in political reporter Paris Schutz now.
Yeah, Paris, tell us about what we've been experiencing. Do we know how many people have been
It began before sunrise, under a dense Chicago fog. While most of the city still slept, the first phase of Operation Midway Blitz was already in motion. Federal agents from ICE, DEA, and the FBI rolled through the industrial corridors of Little Village, Cicero, and Joliet. What followed was one of the most complex federal operations in the city's history, a coordinated strike that would expose a vast criminal web hiding in plain sight. What initially looked like a series of immigration raids soon revealed something much deeper. A sprawling logistics network connecting America's heartland to Mexico's most powerful cartels. This is the human story behind the operation, the strategy, the chaos, and the aftermath, and how it transformed Chicago from a quiet epicenter of trafficking into a battlefield in the nation's fight against organized crime. The Dawn Raid. At precisely 5:30 a.m., the command came through the encrypted Homeland Security Network. All units, execute. In an instant, convoys of armored vehicles and tactical vans surged forward, headlights cutting through the mist. Helicopters hovered above rooftops, their searchlights slicing through the fog as agents breached doors, shouted commands, and flooded dark warehouses with flashlights and smoke. This was no routine enforcement sweep. It was the culmination of months of intelligence work, electronic surveillance, and quiet observation. The targets were chosen carefully. 5 major cartel-linked warehouses suspected of housing drugs, weapons, and financial records. Each team moved with clockwork precision, guided by real-time data projected on glowing command screens inside a control room near Midway Airport. What had begun as an immigration investigation had evolved into something far larger, a multi-agency operation aimed at dismantling an underground empire. A hidden empire. Exposed. By mid-morning, the scope of the operation became clear. What agents found inside those warehouses went far beyond expectations. Stacks of narcotics, coded ledgers, and shipping manifests connecting local fronts to international smuggling routes. In total, officials seized 4.3 tons of narcotics, one of the largest single hauls in U.S. history. The drugs, primarily fentanyl, methamphetamine, and counterfeit prescription pills, were traced directly to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, one of Mexico's most violent and powerful criminal organizations. The discovery shocked investigators, not because of the quantity, but because of the infrastructure behind it. These weren't isolated hideouts. They were part of a sophisticated supply chain operating from inside the United States. The cartel's new frontier. For years, the CJNG's influence had been felt along the southern border. But this investigation showed how deeply it had penetrated American cities. Chicago was no longer just a distribution hub. It was an active command center. Agents uncovered tunnels leading into storage facilities, chemical barrels labeled in Spanish, and pill molds disguised as candy packaging. The cartel had built a self-sustaining ecosystem, using legitimate businesses as camouflage. Tire shops, auto repair garages, and freight companies became the perfect fronts, each one washing cash, moving product, and hiring undocumented workers to avoid detection. In essence, illegal migration had been turned into a smokescreen, hiding a much larger and more dangerous enterprise beneath the surface. The digital hunt. Once the shooting stopped, the forensics began. Inside the ICE command center, evidence tables overflowed with seized phones, hard drives, and laptops. Agents worked in silence, logging SIM cards, decoding ledgers, and following money trails across continents. Cyber teams discovered encrypted chat logs detailing shipment routes, while forensic accountants traced wire transfers through shell companies in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Panama. Each connection revealed another piece of the puzzle, a criminal network operating with the efficiency of a multinational corporation. One veteran DEA agent summarized it simply: they weren't just selling drugs, they were running a shadow economy. Violence in the fog. The early hours of the raid were far from peaceful. At the Bridgeview target site, CJNG gunmen opened fire from the rafters as federal agents stormed the building. Muzzle flashes illuminated the smoke-filled air as the agents returned fire, neutralizing the attackers in under a minute. In Brighton Park, the resistance was heavier. Flashbangs echoed through hallways, grenades rolled across floors, and one agent was wounded while pulling a colleague to safety. By sunrise, the firefights had ended. The silence that followed felt almost surreal. The agents had secured every target, captured 15 suspects alive, and recovered 37 firearms, including 2 grenade launchers. The toll was heavy, but the results were historic. No civilian casualties and the largest coordinated drug seizure in Chicago's modern history. From seizure to strategy. In Washington, officials hailed the operation as a breakthrough in domestic counter-narcotics enforcement. For the first time, federal agencies were treating cartel infiltration as a national security issue, not just a criminal one. The Department of Homeland Security elevated the threat level to Code Amber, signaling that transnational organized crime had crossed from border activity into internal U.S. operations. Officials described it as a domestic spillover event, a term that underscored a new reality. America's biggest threat was no longer just outside its borders. It was operating from within them. The human cost. Behind the arrests and statistics were real people. Many of those detained during the raids were undocumented immigrants who had been drawn into the network through desperation, deception, or coercion. Some had criminal histories, others were simply trying to survive. Investigators found evidence that migrants had been used as couriers, drivers, and warehouse laborers. Some were promised work permits or safe passage in exchange for carrying packages. Many never knew what they were transporting. A senior investigator put it plainly: they weaponized migration. Every person became part of the machine. The revelation sent shockwaves through immigrant communities. The same individuals who fled danger-seeking opportunity had become unknowing participants in a larger, more sinister operation. The backlash. Within days, protests erupted downtown. Hundreds gathered outside the ICE headquarters under gray skies, holding signs that read, "Families, not felons," and "Stop the raids." Activists accused federal authorities of overreach, claiming that innocent migrants had been swept up alongside dangerous criminals. Churches opened their doors to those afraid to return home, while immigration lawyers worked through the night to locate detainees transferred to undisclosed facilities. The tension between federal enforcement and local sanctuary policies reignited across the city. Mayor Brandon Johnson, joined by Alderwoman Julia Ramirez, announced that Chicago would not cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, declaring several neighborhoods ICE-free zones. The move drew applause from supporters but fierce criticism from lawmakers who accused city leaders of undermining national security. Inside the command room. While the political storm raged outside, the agents at the command center kept working. Walls glowed with digital maps and evidence photos, cash piles, weapons racks, coded ledgers, and freight manifests. Analysts traced new leads across the Midwest, identifying sister networks in Indiana, Missouri, and Wisconsin. The mission was evolving from a single city raid into a continental operation. Phase 2 of Operation Midway. Blitz was quietly launched, expanding surveillance across freight corridors and industrial zones. Drone units scanned highways for suspicious heat signatures, while financial investigators tracked new accounts tied to shell companies. The approach had shifted. Less confrontation, more intelligence. The enemy wasn't just visible in warehouses anymore. It was hidden in spreadsheets, code, and data. A divided public nationwide, the operation sparked debate. Supporters viewed it as a necessary defense against infiltration and addiction, while critics saw it as a warning sign of growing militarization in domestic law enforcement. In a press briefing, a senior ICE official dismissed the controversy, saying, "This isn't about politics, it's about sovereignty." His words ignited further argument across television panels and social media, dividing public opinion between those demanding stronger borders and those calling for accountability and reform. For the agents who had faced live gunfire that morning, the debates felt distant. Their focus was on the next target, the next shipment, the next encrypted message that might lead to another breakthrough. the wider war. The uncovering of CJNG's network inside the U.S. marked a turning point. Federal agencies began treating cartel activity as a hybrid threat, part criminal, part insurgent, capable of destabilizing communities and corrupting institutions from within. Homeland Security analysts warned that Chicago might be only the beginning. Similar distribution models were being detected in Phoenix, Dallas, and Atlanta. What had once been a border problem was now a nationwide concern. The war on drugs had evolved. No longer confined to deserts or highways, it had entered America's cities, suburbs, and digital spaces. Vigilance beyond victory. By the end of 2025, Operation Midway Blitz had expanded into a nationwide intelligence program. More than 550 suspects were detained, millions in assets frozen, and several cartel financial channels disrupted. But despite the success, agents knew the fight was far from over. As one DHS official reflected, this wasn't just a raid, it was a warning. The borders we protect now begin inside our own cities. That message resonated deeply. Chicago's skyline, once shrouded in fog, had become the backdrop for a new kind of vigilance. Conclusion. When dawn returned to Lake Michigan, the fog had finally lifted. The armored trucks were gone, the sirens silent, but the mission continued. Inside the Federal Command Center, glowing screens still tracked digital dots representing shipments, accounts, and names, each one a reminder that the fight was ongoing. Operation Midway Blitz had proven something few were willing to admit before. The battle against transnational crime was no longer defined by geography. It was here, in the streets, warehouses, and data trails of America itself. For the men and women who carried out the raid, the victory was measured not in headlines, but in moments. The quiet after chaos, the relief after danger, and the knowledge that vigilance must never sleep. Chicago had become the first city to fight back from within. And in that fog-covered morning, America learned that its front lines were closer than anyone had ever imagined.